Some guitars today are vintage holy grails like pre-war Martin D28s, and the prices on them are crazy high. But if you're like me and have ever wondered about what the original sale price points were on Martins and Gibsons, and if you've ever wondered about how those prices compare with today's prices for new instruments from Martin and Gibson, you'll be interested to see what I learned after looking at some old Martin and Gibson sale catalogs. But first, a short history. Herbert Hoover won the presidency in 1928, promising Americans a chicken in every pot. That was his campaign slogan. Maybe not the greatest slogan by today's standards, but it was one that people understood to mean financial security and maybe even prosperity. But by the time Hoover ran for re-election in 1932, not only were there many a pot lacking its chicken, but the stock market had crashed. Farm foreclosures were skyrocketing. Bank failures were a common occurrence, business closures were rampant, and about 1 in 4 Americans were unemployed. Franklin Roosevelt won that election and was soon assuring Americans that there's nothing to be afraid of now that he's president, except for maybe dust storms, an actual plague of locusts, and the occasional jackrabbit invasion. All that to say, the United States was experiencing some unprecedented hardships. So what were companies like Martin and Gibson supposed to do when the economy and the country at large seemed to be in an all-out freefall? Well, just introduce a product to your line of instruments that will redefine the acoustic guitar for the next 100 years. The Dreadnought. Martin was the first to do this. Now, in looking at this catalog from 1934, we see that Martin had their standard model, which is basically a parlor guitar. They had their orchestra model, which is what we think of today as an OM. They had their arched model, which we call an archtop today. They also had a ukulele, a mandolin, and a mandocello. But in 1934, they introduced a game changer, a 14-fret, square-shouldered D28. The D28 still exists as a model today, and many still think of it as the preeminent acoustic guitar. Advertised specs on this new model say rosewood body, spruce top, ivory edges, reinforced mahogany neck, ebony fingerboard and bridge, wide frets, polished lacquer finish, and something that's interesting, dark top on special order at no extra charge, meaning they're throwing in a sunburst at no extra charge. They're giving you sunburst for free, which is an upcharge now. Not to mention that this guitar was made with Brazilian rosewood because this guitar was being made before the embargo on Brazilian rosewood. The price point on this was $100. The D18 that you see advertised right below is priced at $65. The 18 was cheaper because it was made out of mahogany, its back and sides, as opposed to rosewood. So what do these prices actually mean? If we adjust these numbers for inflation, the D28 was costing customers of 1934 the equivalent of $2,102.85 in today's terms. By comparison, the D18 was costing people the equivalent of $1,366.85, again, in today's terms. When we look at the current price of a D28 and a D18, we can see that the people of the 1930s were able to buy these new Martin instruments for far less money than what we pay for them today. Today, a new D28 costs $3,199, and a new D18, not too far off, will cost you $2,799. So, adjusting for inflation, we're paying roughly 52% more for a new D28 and about 105% more on a new D18 compared to what you would pay in the 1930s. I'll return to these price points again in a bit. That was what Martin was doing. So what was Gibson up to? Like Martin, Gibson had archtops, Gibson had smaller-bodied guitars, Gibson had mandolins, they had ukuleles. Gibson also had some items that Martin didn't have, like Gibson was pretty early in the electric game with an electric archtop called their electric Spanish guitar, or ES for short, think ES335 back in the 1930s. Gibson had an electric Hawaiian guitar. Today I would call this a lap steel. But Gibson didn't have a true dreadnought. Martin basically invented the 14-fret dreadnought guitar and the style took off. So in 1936, Gibson was playing catch-up when it released the Advanced Jumbo. Gibson's new Advanced Jumbo was a dreadnought with rosewood back and sides, intended to directly compete with Martin's D28. Gibson also had a new Dreadnought with mahogany back and sides to compete against the Martin D18. They called it the Jumbo 35, or the J35 for short. Not only were these great-looking quality build instruments, but Gibson had super competitive price points on these guitars as well. The Advanced Jumbo was only $80 as compared to the Martin D28 at $100, and their J35 was only $35 as compared to the Martin D18 at $65. Gibson's Dreadnoughts could be had for significantly less money than Martin's, and if we adjust these prices for inflation, the Advanced Jumbo would cost the equivalent of $1,682.28, and the J35 would cost the equivalent of $736. It's kind of wild to think of being able to buy a new Gibson acoustic comparable to the J35 for only $736. What of today though? Gibson doesn't really have a Rosewood Dreadnought in their standard line today. They do have a Rosewood J45 Studio Edition that can be purchased for $2,399. Just as with the Martin D28 of today, we see this 43% increase in the cost when adjusted for inflation. While Gibson doesn't have a guitar directly comparable to the Advanced Jumbo in their standard line today, they do have an Advanced Jumbo that they sell as a part of their historic collection from their custom shop. The Advanced Jumbo that Gibson offers today comes in at a whopping $5,499. Adjusted for inflation, that's 227% more that Gibson is charging for their version of that guitar today. Looking at the J35, there isn't a direct model equivalent in Gibson's standard line today for this either, but there is something very, very close. It's their J45, which I would say is now their kind of flagship acoustic. It can be had for $2,849. Adjusting for inflation, Gibson is charging 287% more for their standard mahogany Dreadnought than they did in the 1930s, that J35. Jumping back to Gibson's historic line real quick in their custom shop, we find that they do still sell something called a J35 for $4,999. Adjusting for inflation, Gibson is charging customers 579% more for their version of the J35 today. There are probably tons of things that could be unpacked and debated about why and how prices of guitars become what they eventually do. I have no idea what Martin or Gibson's operating costs are. There are numerous budget models offered by both Martin and Gibson, as well as high-end reproductions and custom shop models offered by both today. Not to mention, the market price of an actual 1934 Martin D28 today is estimated between $150,000 and $200,000. But a few things seem certain. 1. The Dreadnought guitar costs significantly more today than it did when they first came on the scene in the 1930s. 2. Martin is charging anywhere between 1 and 2 times as much money for the guitars with the same model names as when the models were first introduced. And 3, Gibson is charging between 2 and 5 times as much money for guitars with the same model names as they were when the models were first introduced. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for sticking with me. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If you own a Martin or a Gibson, tell me about what model it is, about when you bought it, and what you paid for it. I'll also put a link to an inflation calculator in the first comment below so that you can go to it and plug in the amount of money that you paid for your guitar and adjust it for the year that you bought it in so that you can look and see how the price you paid compares with the purchasing power of today's dollar.